It's time for episode 121 of The Crisis Show here on YouTube and now also on iTunes and the For Immediate Release Podcast Network. Good afternoon from New York. My name is Rich Klein. I'm president of Rich Klein Crisis Management and founder and host of The Crisis Show. Today, I am joined by two wonderful colleagues and professionals that have been on my show before. It's been a while, and I'm glad to have them both back. We're going to talk about emergency management. We're going to look ahead to 2017 and give our audience some tips about things that you need to think about in terms of emergency management and emergency communications, crisis management, crisis communications, whatever lingo you want to use. It's all really important in this new world that we live in today. So first of all, I want to introduce from Bellingham, Washington. He is Bill Boyd, and Bill is the corporate health and safety coordinator for a company called Ancon. But he is a 29-year veteran of the fire department in Bellingham, Washington. He's been an incident command instructor. He's worked with Homeland Security and FEMA. I want to welcome back Bill Boyd. How are you, Bill?
I'm good, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. Nice to see you. And from Arlington, Texas, or Fort Worth, Texas, right? We have Rodney Smith. He's the coordinator at Tarrant County College. He has a lot of experience, also 29 years experience in fire safety, fire services. He's a Texas master firefighter, an incident safety officer. He's been the coordinator, he continues to be the coordinator of the Arlington, Texas Fire Department, and he works on disaster management, command and control, swiftwater rescue, and so much more. Hello, Rodney Smith. Glad to have you back.
How are you, Rich?
Good, good. So, gentlemen, I know you haven't met, but I'm glad I put two great minds together for the show. Rodney, maybe I'll start with you. You're on a college campus, correct?
Yes,
Yeah,
we're on college campus.
Yeah, so tell me what's different, if you will, since you're on a campus. What should college campuses be thinking about as we move into 2017 in terms of safety for students and for faculty? What are some of the big issues that you're hearing about through your colleagues and from your work?
Well, I think one of the main things is with active threat and with colleges being so open, a way to communicate and also plans for how to shelter people in place and lock down if we do have someone come on the campus wanting to do harm. We also, this year our college campus got hit by a little bit of a F0 tornado, and so one of the most difficult pieces is communications and getting the alert out and getting the students sheltered.
Yeah, so tell our audience how you do that. I have an idea how you do it from other people I've had on the show, but what do you do at your campus in terms of alerting students to, and is there a difference between a natural disaster, say, versus an active shooter situation?
Yeah. As far as, on a lot of the active shooter situation, we want to get students out of sight, out of mind, and we want to secure the classroom so someone that's out in it can basically hide from that threat. Also, those that are in areas need to flee the area. And so we're in a tornado situation, we may want to use the building for cover. In an active threat situation, we want to put distance, and sometimes if they're able to flee, they need to flee, or they wouldn't necessarily do that in a tornado type situation.
Right. So you said you're training your staff, and you haven't done training for active shooter, but also natural disasters. Is that my understanding?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Bill, maybe you could pick up on some of what Rodney said in terms of your work and what you're seeing in going ahead into 2017. What are some of the critical issues that you're seeing in fire safety, natural disasters, and emergency communications?
Yeah, I would agree with Rodney. I think unfortunately and sadly, the active shooter threat remains, I think, at the forefront of emergency response planning and emergency response. And I find it interesting, and maybe Rodney will agree with this, that, when we're talking about natural disasters, we're talking about sheltering in place, stop, drop, and roll for somebody catches on fire, the close catches on fire, drop, cover, and hold for earthquakes. But when we're talking about an active shooter situation, as Rodney mentioned, putting distance between you and the shooter, actually fleeing, hiding, fleeing, or fighting, kind of a different paradigm and a different model than what we've typically done in the past. And 17, we're going to have to continue to do that, because unfortunately, I think we're going to see more continued active shooter situations, unfortunately.
Now, Bill,
we had an active shooter situation just 20 miles to our south, mall here a few months ago, where 5 people were Macy's department store and killed. And what's that?
No, go ahead. You froze for a second. Continue.
And it's so there's that part of the emergency response, the personal response. Don't become a victim. Get out of the way. Get out of there. And then the whole active shooter response, as far as integrating fire and police, tactical medical teams to go into these unknown situations quickly and rapidly to provide immediate care and evacuation. You're going to see that that educational and deployment effort continue in 2017. And I think you're going to continue to see more active integration of fire department, paramedics and EMTs in with tactical response units in active shooter situations.
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit off air, Bill. So if you could just elaborate a little bit more on that, I found it really interesting. Was that something that was always handled by law enforcement, and fire and first responders were not included as fast as they are now? And tell us a little bit about the training, how they work together, if you can.
Well, back in the late 70s and early 80s, when SWAT teams really came into the forefront, in particular the Bellingham Fire Department, we had some of our paramedics that trained with the Bellingham Fire Department or Police Department SWAT team. And that program fell apart, and a lot of the fire departments got out of supporting and providing that type of emergency care. With the active shooter threat scenarios out there now and the real situations, whether it's San Bernardino, the Cascade Mall shooting, the emergency responders, the paramedics, the medical directors, trauma medical directors really identified a need to re-engage on that effort, bring these paramedics into a realm where they've never operated before. Fire departments have always said, okay, we're going to stage and stand by, and you bring us the patient, SWAT team or police officers, or make the scene safe, and we'll then go in and provide care.
Right.
After these agencies have gone in and done after action reviews on these types of situations, they realize that in fact there may be an opportunity to save lives by acting quicker and yet still remain relatively safe, identifying that yes, there may be some risk involved, but the risk is well worth it if we can get in there and save lives. And I think you're going to see more of those teams train up here in the next year to 2 years.
Interesting. Rodney, what are you seeing in Texas? Certainly, you have a very liberal, gun laws there, right? A lot of people open. I guess it's a real challenge for you guys. Are you seeing that same kind of coordination more recently than in the past with law enforcement?
Yeah, I think one of the main goals is, once we have an active threat, active shooter type situation, is to stop the killing, stop the bleeding, and stop the dying. And so to do that, it takes an integrated, collaborated response. We need police in there as quick as possible to stop the killing. And a lot of times in these situations, to stop the killing, the perpetrators actually taken out by the police department. As soon as we can get parts of the building secured, that's when fire EMS go in and stop the bleeding, stop the dying. And so a lot of it's just immediate care, and then PD actually securing portions of the building so that we can start removing victims very rapidly. In recent incidents around the country, sometimes that coordination wasn't there. So we've got to work to make sure that we can get those victims to medical facilities fairly quick, and it's going to take that joint effort to do that.
Now, Rodney, on your campus, is there a campus police force or just a town police?
Yes, there is a campus police force, and typically they've got 4 or 5 officers here on the campus.
Right, and so I guess, like I've seen some other situations with other guests I've had on the show, there's coordination, pretty good coordination, would you say, between the campus and the town police or the city police?
Absolutely, absolutely. We actually sit in the city of Fort Worth, and there's a very good relationship. We also have a police training center here, so we've actually coordinated the joint training here for active threat.
Very interesting. Now, Bill, you've been very involved. You're an early adopter of Twitter, and you're a big proponent of using social media for emergency communications. And tell us about your experience when you were the public information officer for the Bellingham Fire Department before you became chief. Tell us about the advantages of that and some of the downsides, if any.
Well, I think the biggest advantage of the use of, in particular, Twitter in getting messages out is, number one, it's real time, it's immediate, and it has an exponential logarithmic advantage of getting the information out there to millions of people within a matter of minutes. Because if you get somebody that repeats your message and sends it out to their followers, and let's say they have 20,000 followers, then those 20,000 people turn around and send it out to all of their followers. As you can see, very quickly, you build up a huge audience with one 140 character tweet.
Right.
Now the negative to that, as we've seen more recently in the election and the use of Twitter and social media, it's also an extremely effective way to get misinformation out there, either inadvertently or on purpose. And it really highlights the need to very closely monitor social media channels for misinformation so it can be quickly corrected. I think it also begs a question, or not begs a question, but reinforces the need that before a crisis hits, as an emergency response professional, especially somebody that engages the public or is responsible for getting messaging out, approving messaging that goes out to the public, that those relationships and that presence is established ahead of time.
Right.
And that you have a credible presence and a set of followers, either media, I call them power users, people that are credible in not only social media circles, but also in the community, regionally, even nationally and internationally, that pay attention to what you're saying and are positioned to repeat the message as needed.
Yeah, in fact, right now, I just wanted to give this a test. Twitter, as of today, is allowing live streaming. So I'm just recording the screen as a test because one of my colleagues, Christian Daypoint, reminded me of it today. So how do you think this live streaming on Facebook or Twitter, for example, has made your job more difficult or easier? This live streaming citizen journalists on the scene of active shooters on the scene. Rodney, and either one of you, Rodney, you want to get on this? Or
one of the things 2 weeks ago, we had the Big X, which is a Homeland Security exercise for the Dallas-Fort Worth region. And one of the things we were able to do, we had a mock tornado scenario here on campus, involved 26 different agencies and about 440 responders. One of the tools we were able to use unmanned aircraft to get above and basically do damage assessments and actually stream that back through YouTube to the emergency operations centers and also to the state emergency operations center. And so the value of being able to get that situation awareness and get a common operating picture for all the different stakeholders was just huge. Interesting.
Yeah, so tell us a little more about that, if you will. I got a piece of it. Just tell me a little more about that in terms of you know, what are some of the lessons from that, and how does that help?
Well, some of the lessons from it was, you know, getting something up in the air quick. Where typically during a tornado, you're dealing with so many 911 calls being able to vet those 911 calls becomes extremely difficult. By getting something up in the air, you're able to identify that a lot of those calls are duplicates. A lot of the people are just seeing it from a different street. And with cell phones, we may be generating 20 calls per incident, where in the past with landlines, you didn't see that. So being able to get something up and be able to vet the information, being able to do a proper damage assessment and get the parameter of how big and how bad is this incident is critical.
Yeah, very interesting. Bill, you want to follow up anything that Rodney said on that issue?
My standpoint as an incident commander, when I was on the fire ground, I would have to have Meerkat Order kind of the initial, live streaming and social media. Having let's say a battalion chief in the back of a large burning building that could have his phone out and live streaming what he's seeing in the back of the building, I would have paid money for that.
So
because that would have given me a real-time look at what was and help get that situational awareness that Rodney was talking about from above.
Let me just stop you. That's very interesting, because I guess as a layperson, I've always thought, I've been looking at this from, a citizen journalist point of view. But what I hear you saying is very interesting. In other words, someone's in a dangerous situation and you're trying to fight a fire, let's say, and they can show you what's going on, right? Rather than just the radio, right? Does that make sense?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the visual is everything. Whether it's a map, whether it's a picture, a photograph, or a video, a visual is everything when it comes to gaining and keeping situational awareness.
Very interesting. Yeah, so that's interesting. And now, I guess that would also go for natural disasters, right? You find, and there's been so many wildfires this year, right? That I've read about as well. But,
yeah, the larger the geographical scope of the disaster, the more important it is to have that visual, whether it's a drone or having 14 or 15 citizen responders out there shooting live video on Meerkat or Periscope or Facebook Live, and then having somebody at the command post or in another location. It's a situation unit leader, for instance, within the incident command system, that is somebody there that's looking and evaluating those pictures, especially if it's somebody with operational experience. They're able to take that picture, interpret all of the subtle clues that most people would get, and help give operational guidance to those in the field that are doing the job.
Interesting. One of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about as well, so you guys are always training and always learning how to work together, how to save lives. Talk to us a little bit about the education component. And Rodney, in your case, it would be the students and faculty, obviously. And in your case, Bill, the employees and business executives. What goes into, I know growing up, we always trained for fire drills, and we trained for, the Russians dropping a bomb and you put your head under your desk, back in 1965. What's happening today in terms of, because I get the sense from as I study these scenarios, that the education in terms of personal responsibility has gone up. So can you talk to me a little bit about that? How you work, how many drills you have, and how that works out, and what's the interest on part of the students and faculty in your case, Rodney?
I think one of the things is there's a lot of people out that feel like it's not going to happen to them. And as we see more and more situations happen around the country, and I think quite frankly, there's a lot of institutions that felt like it wasn't going to happen to them. But I think as we've had more and more, we've been forced to really take it serious and really take a close look at what happens if and when it does happen here. So we've had to educate the educators, and they basically have somewhat of a leadership role in the event that something happens. The students, and especially in community college settings, a lot of them are coming and going. They may be here for an hour at a time.
Yeah.
A lot of them know their way in, the way to the classroom, and the way out. And so we're having to really expand that and really look at, you really need to know that alternative way out also, and you need to know where this is at. So a lot of it is really showing them a lot of the things that are already built into the college, but really expanding that since we have people here for such short durations. Also, training in the command level and actually having a command structure here on campus. So when something does happen, key individuals step up and help guide the operation to make sure we're effective.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned that. I hadn't thought about it, so you mentioned it. A community college certainly poses a challenge because of the population that goes in and out, and they're not, some of them may not think about it because they're, like you said, they're just going to the classroom, but they're not living on campus where you have more control over those kind of drills, I guess, like you would with dormitories. So that's really interesting. And Bill, maybe you could talk about the same issue in terms of the company that you work for and what you guys drill for. What kind of things do you guys are concerned about?
Well, specifically my company, frankly, we don't do drills because we're spread across the country. We have an emergency response plan, but what I can do is relate to you how the approach we took when I was at the city. And one of the first things we did was we pushed on personal preparedness and making sure that employees had a plan at home and had their families prepared so that, especially for the what they quote unquote essential employees that were required to report to work after a natural disaster or some big disaster, we want them focused on their work when they come to work. Number one, we want them available. Yes, they're coming to work. And two, once they're at work, that they know that their family has the provisions in place and can be self-sufficient for a period of time so that they can focus on doing work for the community. That's really super important because frankly, and this happened, there's lots of examples of where this has happened where employees simply didn't do that. And so they couldn't come to work, or they didn't come to work because they were dealing with issues at home. And so the personal preparedness aspect is critical. I would say even before, above and beyond the incident command piece, because if you don't have anybody there, you're not going to have anybody in the incident command structure because they're just not available. Yeah. I think the other piece to this too, and this happened, I believe.
Hold on 1 second. Something got played here.
Oh, no problem.
My apology. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. One of the things that happened with an earthquake down around the San Francisco area here a few years ago, they did an after-action interview with the PIOs for the two large communities, or no, community in the hospital, so the city and the hospital and somebody else, about how the challenges they had after that event happened in the early morning hours. Everybody was at home, and the difficulties they had in getting the incident command system ramped up, reporting to work, and getting things spooled up. What was interesting, I found, in listening to their after action, their discussion, they felt like they ramped up very quickly. And if this was 10 years ago, I would have said, yes, they ramped up very quickly because they were able to do it within a couple of hours. Well, a couple hours today, especially when it comes to getting emergency information out there and public information out there, that might as well be 2 months. We need to be looking, communities, businesses need to be looking at innovative, not even really innovative anymore, expected technologies to use in crisis that don't involve having to be physically at a location where an incident command post is, emergency operations center, especially when it comes to public messaging. Those activities need to be enabled, and the plans need to be built around the ability to be flexible in the deployment of those assets away from the incident scene itself. Because people simply may not be able to get to the incident command center. I don't know, Rodney may have some comments on that.
Yeah.
Bill, I think one of the that we realize, and one of the unique challenges we have in North Texas, we have in the North Texas Council of Government region, we have 244 home rule cities. We have 13 cities over populations of 100,000. And so we really don't have that central city concept, that central city is going to provide services for everyone. Also, with the type of events we're dealing with, typically it involves multiple cities. So one of the concepts we're working with here in the region is called regional integration. And so basically we have a box system in the Metroplex where when one city's hit, the other cities come in and take care of it. And a lot of those cities don't
Kind of a mutual aid thing.
Yeah, they don't have mutual aid agreements, but even at the ELC function, we have ELC support teams. Now, something that was unique last year when we were hit by the December tornadoes, who would have thought major tornadoes the day after Christmas? Well, a lot of the staff in those cities that were hit were out of town, were not available to respond. So we have a ELC support team in the region made up of about 52 members that responded into that city to take care of the Emergency Operations Center, because we knew we had a lot of people out of pocket. We're looking at the same for Public Works. We have a Public Works emergency response teams, and Public Works, other cities have already agreed to go in for 48 hours and provide Public Works to clear the streets, to do different things like that. Information support teams to help to get the IT. A lot of companies can't get back up and operating without that infrastructure. So a lot of that, what we're facing here in our unique situation, is being able to have a system that can respond in other areas of the region to basically take over city services till we can get them back up and operating.
Fascinating. And how long has that been going on, Rodney?
This it's been in phase a couple years since our Urban Shield exercise. It was identified as a major gap that a lot of the mutual aid cities, even that you have surrounding you, aren't going to turn loose the resources while we got a tornado on the ground in the region. And so we've had to reach out further and phase that in. During the December tornadoes, Dallas had 40 pieces of apparatus outside their city. They had 5 of their 9 battalion chiefs outside their city. They were tapped out, so they had to go to Tarrant County, and we were able to phase resources over there. We're in the process of formalizing it. Right now, it's not formal. So that's one of the major gaps we saw in Big X and Urban Shield, and we're identifying it with a regional response system.
That's so helpful, Rodney. Thank you. I think audience will appreciate that. That's very interesting. And let me ask you another question just to follow up on that. How much has technology played a role in making that easier, that task of working together in the last few years?
I think technology's played a huge part. We use systems like Rhodium, Incident Management Suite, so that we can get real situation awareness of what's going on all throughout the region. Again, we're able to stream video footage of the actual incident as it's going on to the other ELC for awareness. So I think it's a huge tool. I've said this all along. I said, fire departments a lot of times don't bat an eye to spending millions of dollars on a fire apparatus, but buying an iPhone, it's kind of a stretch for us at times. And so,
It's true.
Technology that's there, it's really, I've been through 2 tornadoes as a firefighter there in Arlington. I'm retired from there now, but that was the tool that I used more so than anything. That truck just got me to a place to use that tool, that iPhone.
Well, they're still bright and shiny and red, and the kids love them.
And I love them.
I love them too.
Amen.
Yeah, so Bill, pick up on what Rodney said, because I'm very curious, because both of you are from different parts of the country. I find this really interesting. So Rodney's talking about these cooperative efforts when things happen in one city, one location. Tell me about where you are in the Northwest. How does that work by you?
Well, we have mutual aid agreements with all of our various fire departments, and we also have what's called statewide mobilization for fire and law enforcement mobilization laws that allow us to tap in through the state and call resources from out of region. Specific to my location, Bellingham is the largest city within about 70 miles. And the rest of it's pretty rural or small towns. So we're kind of like the big kahuna, if you will. Right. And so the resources that we would be calling would come from the Everett area, which is north of Seattle, and all the surrounding small cities. I think one of the other things we realized that we had a large disaster here in 1999. We had an underground gasoline pipeline that ruptured. Actually, that's kind of a timely topic given the whole North Dakota thing. Yeah. We had an underground pipeline rupture and spilled 270,000 gallons of unleaded gasoline into a creek, flowed down about 1.5 miles, and then unfortunately was inadvertently torched off by a couple of kids playing with a lighter. Killed both of the kids. Another 18-year-old adult drowned drowned in the creek. It was overcome by fumes before the fire ignited and died. Burned down some homes, destroyed the city's water supply system that had to get rebuilt. And one of the things that we learned, one of the takeaways we learned from that is there isn't a fire department or a law enforcement agency around large enough, or LA, that could roll into an incident like that and take over and deal with it. We also learned that there's agencies, they're not typically known as emergency response agencies or organizations or departments that get tapped to actually provide an emergency response, whether it's attorneys, whether it's public works people, whether it's the parks department. Everybody in a community that's in a public sector role ends up being an emergency responder in those situations, and in some cases being used in non-traditional ways. And so when we were putting, after this event happened, we did a lot of after-action discussions, reviewed our operational procedures and our emergency response plans as a city, and took a more holistic view of how we deploy resources in an emergency. Not only us deploying to take care of our own, but how we can go into other communities and agencies and provide support to their operations. So it's a little bit similar to what Rodney's talking about, but it sounds like he has a lot more like agencies or communities around him that he could pull resources. They could pull resources in to assist them. And our lag time on something like that can be pretty significant in getting those resources to us because of our unique geography.
But again, I imagine technology has helped make that more efficient. And in recent years, has it helped in your area?
Yeah, I would say in some ways it has, in some ways it hasn't. The challenges with technology is, and Rodney knows this too, he's had these tornadoes, is one of the first things that happens with those things is it wipes out your IT infrastructure.
Yeah.
So redundancy is important. And so you have to have flexibility built into your technological solutions, all the way down to relying on good old fashioned pen and paper and somebody getting in a car and driving messages across the city to somebody else. Having town hall meetings or going to the local tavern and posting things on bulletin boards. All of those traditional and somewhat antiquated approaches, depending on the type of emergency, may actually have to be put into place. So I would just caution everybody, and Rodney knows this, I'm preaching to the choir here, is you can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, no, our audience doesn't, so that I appreciate that, What are you guys seeing in terms of natural disasters? We talk about tornadoes, we talk about floods, we talk about wildfires. Has the training changed in any of those areas in recent years in terms of search and rescue or anything like that our people should know about?
I think one of the things that we've seen is a lot of the training and your FEMA urban search and rescue type training. A lot of it was aimed at earthquakes. I think a lot of the teams were formed due to earthquakes hitting across the country. And I think as it spread across the country, we kind of followed that model. And a lot of the training was aimed at heavy concrete and lifting, moving, breaching, breaking, those types of things. I think one of the things we've really looked at here in North Texas is we're really not dealing with earthquakes per se. We are dealing with earthquakes, but on a lot smaller scale. So we've had to look at what do our folks really need to be trained on. And there's a lot of wide area search. There's a lot of technical search. There's some different things, not as much lifting, breaching, breaking, things like that. Though those are the things our guys like to do, the reality is we're dealing with sticks and bricks. We're not dealing with heavy concrete. So being able to get into an area to recon it, to do your initial damage assessments, to get the information out, basically to get a lot of the funds flowing. Those are a lot of the things we're starting to train, but also is how do I take this from a battalion chief that's used to running 1 and 2 alarm fires, and now for the first operational period, they're running a disaster. So we're really having to front end load those incident commanders also on how to take this incident from what you're used to this thing that's probably going to be a state or federal response.
So I mean, as a layperson, it seems to me what I hear you saying is that for many years people trained for earthquakes, and now we're seeing so with at least the last decade, for example, for lack of a better time frame, I mean, at least I see it, more tornadoes, more major flooding, more disastrous flooding. I mean, I lived through Superstorm Sandy here in New York, so that's relevant to me. And of course, these wildfires that just seem on the rise as well from these droughts. So, Bill, maybe you could pick up on that as well in terms of the preponderance of these incidents and how that affects training.
I think, well, and like Rodney, I'm Bellingham as a state college. We have a Western Washington University. I'm a proud alum, by the way, and we have a disaster resiliency degree program here. And I think what you're going to continue to see is more land use planning and the mitigation efforts, in particular with earthquakes. I hopefully see more emphasis placed on front loading infrastructure and resilience in communities, so that when something does hit, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, those communities can get back on their feet faster because maybe they don't sustain as much damage. Now, this is a 30 or 40,000 foot view, but I think that's the reality of what we're dealing with, especially in the Cascadia fault zone, which is where we're located, where they're predicting this huge, 9.0 earthquake and sometime in the future, which there's no responding to that really. It's going to be every person for themselves and every neighbor for themselves. But you're going to see a continued emphasis on that. I'd also see the when it comes from a training standpoint and a response standpoint, and Rodney mentioned this earlier, drone technology and integrating drones federally, state level, and in local agencies to get up in the air quickly to survey and establish hotspots where resources need to go first, whether they're going to chop concrete or take sawzalls and start chopping up wood. You need to be able to send the most appropriate resource to the most important spot quickly. And I think drone technology is going to be critical and probably going to be a focus for the next few years, integrating into disaster response planning. And
you're talking about drone cameras, of course, just for our audience who may not be clear on that, because some kids play with.
Right.
But from what I've seen, I was in the store the other day. I mean, you can get a drone camera now for less than $200. I'm sure the ones you guys get are much higher definition, but it's accessible technology to everybody.
I just bought a little $20. This is anecdotal, but I just bought this little $20 mini drone, no camera in it, and took it out and started playing with it inside my house. And that thing shot up 200 feet in the air in about 5 seconds.
Wow.
And if it had a camera on it and I could spin that thing around and videotape that, have it live fed or recorded, I think from an incident command standpoint, especially on a fire, that would be huge. And I think we're really, there we go. There's a drone. There's mine isn't that big.
One more time. I missed it. I was, that's a great example. Thank you. I just want to look a little closer. Hold on for a minute. Thank you for sharing that. No, that's great for our viewers to see that. It's incredible. It's incredible.
And that particular drone there, that's the DJI Phantom, and it has a range of about 1.5 miles out and 1.5 miles up. So yeah.
Wow.
You can see a lot of stuff from that eye.
No, thank you for sharing that. It bodes the question: is that live streaming video to you, or you're seeing as it happens? Incredible.
Yes, that will live stream video.
And gentlemen, are fire departments around the country, are they starting to invest in this technology?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Good.
Yes, they are. Yeah. And in fact, search and rescue organizations, mountain rescue organizations, wilderness rescue organizations are also integrating those because you can search so much more territory, especially if they have infrared capability in dense foliage environments. Useful.
Great. Well, this was a great show. I mean, guys, there's so much to talk about. We've covered so many areas. And before we wrap up, I just want to ask you, gentlemen, is any anything for final tips you would give to any of our viewers out there who may be, employees, maybe executives, maybe public officials, just some things to think about as we go forward to 2017 that maybe they haven't thought about?
I think Bill hit on it, is personal preparedness, and I think a lot of times when disaster hits, it's hard to get focused on getting your business back up and operating or responding to calls when you know that you may have something going on at home that's not taken care of. So I think preparedness starts right there at home, and really looking at, a few years ago when Katrina hit, I started really looking at what would happen if tomorrow everything I own was gone and I had to pick up and start somewhere else. And where is all the information? Where's all the pictures? Where's everything? And so looking at how do you have that redundancy and have things backed up and be able to start over somewhere else? The same with a business. How do we open back up tomorrow if all our data's gone? So we really got to look at personal and also contingency plans on data.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, for, so much of our lives today are intertwined. It's not, we bring our work home with us, we bring things to work. So it's a very interesting topic. And you said that so beautifully, Rodney. So thank you. I appreciate that. And Bill, any thoughts from you before we wrap up?
Yeah, Rodney, that's a great point, Rodney. I agree with that 100%. I think the other thing that businesses and public agencies need to value equally as importantly as personal preparedness after a crisis hits is maintaining their credibility. And maintaining credibility and or market profitability. If you talk about a business, in large part will rely on public perception. And in disasters, a lot of public perception is based on speed of communication. And so not only communicating rapidly, but engaging with stakeholders, whether it's clients if you're a business or citizens if you're a public agency. So engaging with them, making them aware that as an agency or a business, you care about them and are working to solve the problems to get things up and running again. Maintaining credibility is critical in a disaster situation. And Rodney could speak to this too. There's a lot of public officials out there that lost their elections after a disaster because they lost their credibility. And in today's in today's environment of instant news information, it's important to get for our public officials and business owners and shareholders, make sure they engage with the public and the citizens.
Yeah, both excellent points. And I just want to wrap up, kind of summing up a little bit. I think that first responders do a tremendous job. In my world of crisis communications, I watch all the news conferences when we have these disasters, we have active shooters and tornadoes and people injured, whatever the case may be. And it's really, for the most part, done very well, very often. In terms of the teamwork, whether you have a mayor, a governor, you have a hospital spokesperson, you have the chief of the state police, you have the chief of the fire department, or whatever the case may be, and people appearing in one place to get the message out about what happened and also about what the public needs to do or not do, because you don't want to, maybe it's in the middle of a crisis and people need to stay away from a situation or stay away from a site. So those things are all important. I think companies need to do a better job on this. I think CEOs and the executives right under them still have a way to go in terms of planning for the worst and actually having a plan to respond. Like you said, Bill, things are happening in real time, much too quickly for some of the people running companies, and they can't deal with the flow of information. And we see it on their Twitter feeds, and they may have a Facebook account and Twitter feed where they're promoting something, but then when disaster strikes, they're deer in headlights. They don't respond fast enough. And certainly you need to have an incident command center in your business as well. And I think people need to think about that going forward into 2017. So, by the way, thank you both so much. This was a great show. I would love to have both of you back together. This was a really good chemistry and a good discussion. So much to talk about. And one of the things we do on the Crisis Show, as you guys know, is tap into breaking news. So next time there is And unfortunately, as we know, these things happen all the time, these kinds of disasters in the workplace and communities, that I bring you guys back on, and we could give it some analysis, maybe do a case study on one of these things that do happen. So thank you both. Bill Boyd in Bellingham, Washington. Bill, thank you again. And
You're welcome.
Rodney Smith in Fort Worth, Texas. Thank you so much. You guys are brilliant, and I loved having you. So have a great day, a great happy holiday to both of you. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. And
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
thanks again, guys. And I hope you guys connect offline. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
All right.
Be well.
Thanks, you too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.